Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for tuning into this short screen tutorial from historychappy.com. It's on how to complete the GCSE Edexcel History Exam Unit 1 on the Cold War 1943 to 1991, and it's applicable if you're taking your examination in summer 2016 and summer 2017. So thank you for watching, I hope it's useful. This is what the paper will look like. And to the right there you have the question numbers, the marks available for those questions, and the particular foci that the examiners are looking to see that you have met. It's worth 53 marks in total. So let's get into it. It's how it's going to work. I'm going to show you an exemplar question, then I'm going to show you the mark scheme, then I'm going to show you some scaffolding or sentence stems which will hopefully enable you to answer those questions correctly. So the first question is probably the easiest question you will face in your entire history GCSE. You've just got to give two reasons from the source that show something. So it's essentially a cut and paste job, really, just understanding source material. You haven't necessarily got to do anything with it, you've just got to understand it. So you can see here for 1 to 2 marks from the source previous, all you'd need to do is extract 2 reasons from it. So 2 marks, really, really easy. You'll be asked to identify 2 things that you can learn from a source. You get a point for each one. Glorified cut and paste. If you look in the blue, there you have the sentence stems. The first reason is cut paste. Second reason is cut paste. I think the key here is just don't overcomplicate it. There's no real degree of difficulty required or needed. So just identify. You haven't got to infer anything like the source questions for the Germany and Britain paper. It's really simple. Just cut, paste, job done. The second question, you've got to outline 2 things that maybe happened or occurred. In this case, it's 2 steps that President Carter took to encourage the Soviet Union to withdraw from Afghanistan. So what does the mark scheme say we need? Well, it's looking for knowledge recall and selection. So 2 marks are available for each outline, so for each thing, plus a second mark for some additional detail or specific contextual knowledge. So you get a mark for the step and a mark for some knowledge to support. Here's my strategy. I would outline the reason, highlighted there in orange for you, and then support that with some specific contextual knowledge or some specific detail. Do that twice correctly and you'll get the full 4 marks. So essentially just outline a reason, support it with some specific contextual knowledge. Make sure it's something someone couldn't make up on the spot, so make it like a name, a fact, a place, a figure, a statistic, a reason, a cause, an event, a consequence, just something specific that can be made up on the spot, and you should harvest 4 marks there quite easily. Moving on. Okay, this is the question on source usefulness. It's very, very similar to the Unit 3 question, which will be on source reliability, where you will get 2 sources, and you will have to, but in this case, answer how useful they are. It's only worth 10 marks, so let's have a look how we might approach this. Well, the mark scheme says for between 4 to 6 out of 10 marks, you'd need to either make a judgment based on the usefulness of the source's content, its information, or you make a judgment based on its nature or origin or purpose. If you do either one of those, you'll be looking at between 4 or 6 marks. But for top marks, you're going to need to make a judgment on its content and its nature or origin or purpose. So let's have a look at this quite wordy mark scheme here. You haven't got to read it all. Just for 10 marks, you need a judgment based on both elements of level 2, as we previously discussed, looking at the contribution the sources can make to the inquiries. You're looking at how useful they are for a specific purpose. Just be careful not to state that it is reliable or unreliable just without backing that up or linking it to the purpose of the inquiry. For 10 marks, if you do both of the things at level 2, make a judgment on how useful they are, and you use some own knowledge. It says NB at the bottom there. No access for level 3 farms that do not make use of additional knowledge. If you do those things, then you should be looking at top marks. So here's a way you can potentially structure it. Moving on. So it's usefulness, nature, origin and purpose, and includes some own knowledge. Here we go. Now this looks quite complex. So essentially at the top of the screen, you've got 2 different ways that you could approach the question. Believe me, it's not that complex because it's only worth 10 marks. So you can either discuss the content of both sources, then the nature or origin or purpose of both. It doesn't got to be the same for both. It could be the nature for one and the purpose for the other, or vice versa, so on and so forth. And then you make a judgment how useful they are. So that's what I call the skills or mark scheme based approach. What you could also do is, if you want to discuss one source at a time, so discuss its content, then its nature, origin or purpose, then move on to your next source, so the content, then nature or origin or purpose, then make a judgment about how useful they are. That's absolutely fine. So you can either take it the skills based, content, then not, or you could do one source at a time, then make a judgment how useful they are. Here we have an outline based on the skills-based approach here. So here are some sentence starters for you. Essentially what it does is it's like a sandwich of usefulness. So it answers the question at the start and then again at the end. Here are some potential sentence structures or some scaffolding for you. Essentially just make sure you're picking out something specific from the content and analysing or explaining how useful that is for the purpose of the inquiry. And do the same for the nature, so what type of source it is, origin, where the source is from, and the purpose, what the source was produced for. How does that impact on usefulness for the purpose of your inquiry? And just then with the judgment, it may be that they're both not very useful, it may be that they're both very useful, or it may be that one is useful and the other one isn't to some extent or degree. Just make sure you use a bit of own knowledge to support what you're saying at some point. If you don't use some own knowledge, then you won't be able to get top marks. So essentially, it's just a case of picking your approach or format and going for it. And you only need like a couple of sentences on each. It's only worth 10 marks. You don't have to write a massive essay. Some students do get lost with this question because the mark scheme, as you've just seen, is quite bitty. Of particular, it's requiring content, then nature, origin or purpose, then some own knowledge, then a judgment. What I ask students to do who might be struggling or sort of hemorrhaging time on this question is, as they're writing it, use different coloured pens to show the different parts of the answer. So the leading language, this source is useful because the relevant knowledge, which you'll need for 10 marks, the content of the source is used, references to usefulness, then your judgment. Or you could write the question, then highlight the different parts of the answer. Obviously don't do that in the exam because you haven't got time and you don't need to. But when you're sort of formulating responses or approaches to this question, that can be quite useful for some candidates so they can literally see the breakdown of those different criteria which are required in the mark scheme. I think the key question here is don't spend too much time on it because it's only worth 10 marks. The next question, the nice key features question, which you will already have seen in Unit 2, the Germany paper, which asks for key features. So you'll get a choice here, key features, in this case, of the refugee problem in Berlin, or the key features of the INF Treaty signed in December 87. What do we need for top marks? We need 2 or more developed statements. So it's a simple statement supported by some factual detail. And the factual detail, the rule of thumb is something that couldn't be made up on the spot. And key features are causes of an event, events, or consequences or effects of the event. The only caveat here is to make sure if you're doing key features, you do them in chronological order. So you could discuss as part of your 2 or more features, you could do a cause and event, or you could do an event and a consequence, or you could do a cause and effect, or cause and consequence. Just make sure you put your key features in chronological order. And you'll need 2 of those supported by some specific contextual knowledge. So here's my technique. One feature of the Truman Doctrine, if this was the question here, describe the key feature of the Truman Doctrine. One feature of the Truman Doctrine was state your key feature, the cause, the event, or the consequence, because, moreover, subsequently, and use some SEK, so some specific contextual knowledge to support what you're saying. You haven't got to use all of these connectives here to add more knowledge. You just need a simple statement, really, supported by some specific contextual knowledge. Repeat it, and so do it again. Just make sure you get your 2 key features in chronological order. It's as simple as that. Moving on. Okay, the 15-mark question. Sounds like it's going to be a long one, but it's absolutely not. It's actually 3 separate 5-mark questions. You've got to explain the importance or significance of 3 of the following, and you'll do those separately. You haven't got to link them at all. So you just pick your 3. It could be Tehran, formation of NATO, and Prague Spring. In that case, you wouldn't have to do the Berlin Wall. You just pick 3. And this is how it will look on the paper. So for each paper of the examination paper, you just tick or cross the box that you're answering. So if you're answering Tehran conference, you cross that and you answer just the Tehran conference part there. Then you flip the page, you tick your next one. If it's Prague Spring, you cross that. So there's no linking or connecting of factors required whatsoever. So all you've got to do is explain the importance with some detailed factual support. So the real key here is to explain its significance or importance, not necessarily a blow-by-blow account of what actually happened. Because if you just describe or explain the event for the sake of doing that, you really will get no marks. You've got to explain why it's important or significant, the impact it had, how it had ramifications for future relationships, so on and so forth. So explain the importance of the event using precise supporting evidence. Don't just describe it, and that's really key. Solely just telling the story of what happened will get you absolutely nowhere, no matter how much specific contextual knowledge you use. You must always relate this to how it is significant and or important. Now, what I call the answer is the significant sandwich. So you start with a statement about how it's important or significant, then you end with a statement about how it's important or significant, then get your explanation of how it's important or significant and your specific contextual knowledge in the middle. Again, you haven't got to use all these connectives, they're just here to help you elaborate on your answer. But the key is to remember to explain how it's important. What impact did it have on future relationship? How did it change the course of events? How was it significant? So you're looking at the effect it really had, the importance of it, what did it signify, rather than telling the story of the event or indeed what led up to it. So it's all about significance, effect, impact, how it changed the direction of events in some way, shape or form. That's the key there. Just a simple paragraph will do you. Okay, moving on to the final question. So you're explaining why relations between, or sort of why something changed or became different over time. It could be for the better, or in this case indeed for the worse. And it's over a given time period, which will be very precise. So make sure first and foremost, whatever you're going to explain is within that time period. Anything outside the time period will not be credited. So look very, very carefully at the time period you're dealing with. In this case, it's 45 to 48. Edexcel will be nice, they'll give you 2 bullet points, which I suggest you use, although you don't have to. But you must also include at least one other factor of your own. So in this case, you could talk about Novikov's telegram, Marshall Plan. There's so many things you could talk about to add in your additional point. But you must add something. Here's the mark scheme. So you must prioritise causes or see links between them. So you're looking at the relationship between causes, explaining how they change in some way, shape or form. To get 12 or 13 out of 13, did judgment on the relative importance, so you're ranking those causes or changes in order of how important they are. And you must include something above and beyond the stimulus material, otherwise you're going to get nowhere. Okay, moving on. So this is how if I was sort of going for a sort of rule of thumb approach, talk about bullet point 1, how it caused change, link it to your next point, talk about how that causes change, link it to the own factor, how that causes change, and then give your judgment on the relative significance of the changes. This is a simple way, so you've got success criteria here. 3 factors, judgment on the support on the relative significance of the changes or links between them. Do this 3 times. Again, you haven't got to talk about or utilise all of the connectives, there's no need for that. But just making sure that you're explaining how it changes events. Don't just explain events for events' sake. And then you give your judgment on the relative significance of the changes. This is all about how things change over time in a given time period. So for each of the factors you're going to talk about, maybe use something like that. And then for your judgment, give your relative significance of the changes or the causes of change here. Again, it's not mandatory to use these sentence stems, but you can do, unless you've got something better, obviously. And good luck for your exam. I really wish you all the best. You can tweet me at History Chappy, Instagram History Chappy, or www.historychappy.com. I wish you all the best then. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.